and welcome back to The Hobby Musician. You're joining us today as we work ourselves through a mini-series of the most ambitious project that we've ever attempted on this channel. We are currently building a matched set of 2 bass guitars completely from scratch and completely using salvaged or scavenged material. Now, if you want to get caught up on any of the episodes before, because if I reference something that's happened in the past, or if you want to just jump around to the different phases of this project, make sure you click the link at the top and that'll open up a playlist where I've arranged all of the different steps in this long project. Well, today's episode is going to be all about the wood. Now, as I mentioned just a second ago, one of the, inspirations behind this project is that I've seen a lot of other folks on YouTube kind of do these projects where they reclaim something, or they take materials that are destined for the trash heap and try to make them into something usable. Well, I really like that idea, and I've never personally tried it, so that was one of my guiding principles when I was thinking out this build. So the wood that I was going to end up using was going to have to be something that I could find or I wanted to make sure that it was something that other people were just going to throw out. So to get started, I asked around at work and I went to some of the folks that work in the kind of shipping and receiving department, and I just asked them, have you gotten any large shipments recently? Maybe something like some of those wooden shipping pallets. And it just so happened they had been kind of collecting up a stack of pallets that they weren't going to use. They were just kind of consolidating them, getting ready to throw them out. So they told me just look through them and take whatever you want. So you can see here, I loaded up just as many as I thought I was going to need. I kind of picked through, looked for ones that were in better shape, and I popped them in the car and brought them home. Now, shipping pallets were going to be great, but when I started taking dimensions of the different phases, I was going to need to make a blank to cut the bodies out of, but I'm also going to need some longer strips or longer runs to be able to make the necks out of. And these shipping pallets got me a good start. I had a lot of wood to work with for the bodies and then for some of the cosmetic stuff, but I knew that I was going to need something longer for the necks. So the other place that I went is here in the Baltimore area. We have a fantastic kind of, it's really hard to describe. It's called Second Chance, and it's really a place where companies that might be building houses or renovating houses, if they have leftover materials, they donate it to this place, and this is a charity. They resell it, but it focuses primarily on leftover materials that you can go in, and they also happen to have an area where if they go through donations and there's just stuff that they don't think is resellable, they put it out in a free bin area. So I went out there and also was able to collect up some wood that was going to be long enough to be able to use for the neck. Now you can see that having a pallet does not necessarily mean you're home free. I was going to have to do some work to this wood. And in this video you can kind of see that I set up in the backyard and I just had to pull out a hammer and a screwdriver and a pry bar, and I just had to get to work. I was pulling up the boards, trying to separate them from all of the internal bracings. And after a lot, it took a few hours to get this all done, you can see that I ended up with some usable pieces. Now along the way, sure, some of the boards would split, or I'd find, rotted pieces kind of underneath. So I wasn't able to use everything, but I was able to scavenge enough. Now the next step was to take all this. I needed straight, flat pieces. So a good friend of the channel, Randy Race, he's been on many episodes here, was gracious enough to let me come over to his fully functioning wood shop that he's got set up, and I was able to borrow his table saw, his thickness planer, and we made quick work of these boards. We just essentially, he helped me take all of the piles of wood that I had and just run them through a planer so that they were flat on top and bottom, and I had measurements prepared ahead of time of the strips that I knew I was going to need to laminate these blanks that I was going to cut my body out of. So for example, when we got all of the wood done, you can see here, this is an example of the kinds of strips that I cut because I wanted to laminate a body. So imagine one of these They were the right dimension, and again, like I said, we were able to get them planed flat top, bottom, and cut down to size. Now I could just stack board after board after board on either side, and you can see here with a little bit of wood glue, I was able to make a laminated block, and that just is a term that means taking strips of wood and just gluing them together. After I got the glue, I just pulled out all my clamps and just really tightly clamped it, let it sit overnight, and then at the end of all of that, strips like this turn into a laminated block just like this. And you can see here, I've even got the pencil outline. I took my template that we had created in an earlier episode, and I've already traced out the template of where I'm going to cut. And you can see, it's just the right dimensions, and these were the measurements that I took to Randy's place ahead of time. I knew I was going to need blocks exactly this long, and we just kept cutting and cutting, and you can see this is definitely salvaged wood. It looks like we've got a repeating pattern or just kind of a random pattern, but the good news is the plan for this is cosmetically we won't actually be seeing this, because in a later episode I'm going to show you or take you through the design that I have for a very thin kind of cosmetic top piece. So really you're only going to see these patterns from the back side of the instrument, which I'm okay with. It's a salvaged wood guitar. Now from this, obviously by gluing them together, I needed to go back. There's a lot of sanding involved in a project like this. So I sanded it kind of rough at first, and then you can see here I took a hand planer, and after I got the big bumps down of like where the glue was, I took my hand planer and I really went to town on both blocks. Remember, we're building a match set. So I had my 4-string, this is the 4-string one, and there's an identical looking blank for the 5-string. And so that was all ready now. It's the right size. It's ready for that top to go on, and then I can come back with my jigsaw and actually cut the body out for real. So that's how we took care of the bodies, or that's how the bodies are going to come out. Well, the second thing I mentioned was necks. So in a similar way to using these pieces of wood as laminated, we also had longer strips of wood that I was able to do the exact same thing when I was at Randy's shop. We took these boards and once again we planed them so that they were perfectly flat and level on top and bottom, and then I took the boards and set them upright and we zipped them through his table saw so that I just had board after board after board of this thickness. Now, the tall wise this way, this is the thickness that I want the neck blank to be, because then on top of it is going to be the fingerboard where all the frets get cut into and everything, and then I made sure that that thickness was exactly what I wanted before we start putting in the truss rod and those kind of things. So once again, you can see here in this video, I sat down with a whole box of these strips, and after gluing them all together and clamping them just like we did the last time, now we've got a similar neck blank that I can lay my template on and trace out and cut it out for the neck. Now this one I haven't done as much sanding and leveling yet as I did for the body blanks, but already, I mean, it's got a few high areas and low areas, and I'll just zip those out like I did last time. But this method, the method of kind of finding wood and laminating the wood, you're going to add back in some of the strength that you would get if you started with a solid piece of wood. Now it's not going to be identical, but it's going to be usable. And I think that's the name of the game for me on this build. So that is how we're going to handle the wood. And for the next phase of the project, like I was talking about a second ago, I need to do some cosmetic work. So if you're thinking about a project like this and you want to try kind of rescuing some materials that would otherwise go to trash, I highly recommend it. So I hope you got something out of this episode, and as always, I really appreciate you watching. So until next time, play on, my friends, play on.